Hello, and welcome to Dr. Han Hu's Machine Learning for Mechanical Engineers. Today, we will be running through a quick tutorial to help you get comfortable creating your own programming projects in preparation for the upcoming coursework. This guide will follow the steps to create a Python project using the Visual Studio Code IDE. The machine learning class does not have a required language or IDE, but Python is a commonly used language in data science, and Visual Studio Code is free for all users. If you would like to use another language or IDE that you're more comfortable with, you have the option to do so. This tutorial is for students who do not have an in-depth programming knowledge, but want to learn how to code in an environment that is commonly used in an industrial or academic setting. To get started, we will download three things: Visual Studio Code, the Python programming language, and VS Code tutorial zip file. All three of these are linked below. The first thing we need to download Visual Studio Code is located here. You should see this screen. Select your operating system and go ahead and download the .exe and run it. Accept the user agreement, and default settings are fine. If you would like to make changes, you are free to do so. I am not downloading this as I've already have it installed on my machine, but here's where you would hit install. Once that is installed, we will also download Python 3.12. One thing to note, this is not the latest version of Python. Versions 3.13 and higher are not compatible with TensorFlow, which is a common library that is used in our machine learning class. This might change in the future, however, at the time of recording this video, this is not the case, so we will be downloading 3.12. Again, select the appropriate operating system, run the .exe, and hit install now. Once both of these have been downloaded, we will go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code. You should see something pretty bare bones and something similar to this. Before we proceed further, we need to realize that Visual Studio Code is a multi-language IDE, which means we have to set it up to use Python. In order to do so, we have to come down here to Extensions and install the Python extension. And while we're here, we're also going to download the Jupyter Notebook extension. This one's not required. However, for my tutorials and how I prefer to program, this contains features that I will typically use. We can go over those later in the video. Once both of those are installed, we can head back over to the home screen where you will see this blank screen. We're going to open up the folder that you have downloaded. It can be placed wherever you want. Mine's placed on the desktop, but as you can see, I have VS Code tutorial here. We're going to select that folder and open it up, and you'll see all of these items. This is the trained model. Not really relevant to today. It's just to ensure that your program is working. This is a requirements file that contains the libraries that are used to run the program. This is the data file that you will use. And this is a modified version of the self-regression homework that will be assigned later in the course. Before we can begin, we need to make sure we set up our environment. An environment is what stores all of your libraries and dependencies for your projects. For the purpose of this class, you could create one environment that is referenced by every homework and potentially your project as well. However, best practice is to typically store your environments in the folder of the project that you're working on. So for example, if you have homework 1 and are working on homework 1, create a homework 1 virtual environment that is stored in your homework 1 folder. To do this, what you're going to do is come down to the bottom right where you see 3.12. Mine says 3.13 because I have Python 3.13 installed as well. You'll select it and you'll come up here to create virtual environment. You have two options, venv or conda. I do not have conda installed, so I will choose the .venv virtual environment. Select it. Now it wants me to select an interpreter. This is where I'm going to point to the Python language that we downloaded previously. This is what is telling the program, hey, this is Python, this is what it looks like. So I'll select Python 3.12. For the purpose of checking your code and seeing if you have downloaded Python right, there's also the option to select a requirements.txt file. I have exported from my previous project, from my previous homework 4, a requirements.txt file that will allow us to download every library used in that homework. I'm going to go ahead and select it and hit OK. And this will now begin to download all of these libraries that are mentioned here. This isn't going to be necessary for every homework, but for the purpose of this tutorial and to make sure your code works, I wanted to include this step. Once that's done installing the libraries, it should take about a minute or two. You should see this .venv folder in your project folder. And if you come out here to your VS Code tutorial folder, you'll see that a .venv folder has been created as well. So now we can theoretically run our program and see if it works. You should see something that looks like this. If you see this graph, then you know that you have installed Python and Visual Studio Code correctly and can proceed with the homeworks. The remainder of the video will show you how to create a new homework assignment and activate your virtual environment. As you can see, we're back on the home screen of VS Code. If we go to the desktop, you'll see that I've also created a homework 1 folder with nothing in it. Coming back to VS Code, we're going to go ahead and open that folder and select it, which will bring it up in the VS Code Explorer. Now I want to create a new file. It's going to be a .py file, so new file, Python file. And we have untitled 1 that I want to save as homework 1. So we have a homework1.py in the homework 1 folder. From here, we can start importing our libraries, writing code, or whatever else is necessary for the homework. For example, I'm going to import NumPy, which is a common Python library. As you can see, it is not happy with NumPy. The reason being, we have not set up our environment that has NumPy within it. If you hover your cursor over it, you'll see import NumPy could not be resolved, which is a common error message when that is the case. And as you recall, we haven't set up our virtual environment either. So to do so, again, remember, bottom right-hand corner, come down here, create virtual environment, venv, select your interpreter, which is 3.12, and it will create the virtual environment, as you can see in the top left-hand corner with our venv folder. To double check, you can also go to the folder that it's stored in and see that it's creating the folder in there. Once that environment has been created, you'll see that it is also activated down here, and you can select it from up here when you select your interpreter. Once we have that, we still need to install and import NumPy in order for it to be stored in the virtual environment. To do so, come up to View, Terminal, and you will get a terminal. Pip install NumPy. Once you hit enter, you will see that it is downloading NumPy into the environment and it installing the collected packages, and it has successfully installed NumPy 2.2.1. If you would like to confirm that NumPy has been installed, if you type pip list, it will list all of the packages that are currently installed in your virtual environment. This will allow you to confirm that everything you have needed has been downloaded. One final thing I wanted to show you before we end the tutorial is how to check if your virtual environment is activated and how to activate it if not. First thing you want to do, come down to this plus and launch a command prompt. You'll see from the bottom left the .venv within parentheses. That signifies that our virtual environment is activated. Hopefully you have found some use out of this tutorial. If you need further guidance, Python and VS Code tutorials can be found that go more in depth online. Good luck with the upcoming semester.